Hello and welcome back to the channel. On this one we're talking about the only trading tool you need, and that is trading trend line. And that is how to set them, touch points, how to read them, the volume going alongside it, the retest, and obviously how to trade them with your entry, your stop loss and your target prices, and kind of overall managing and closing the trades. So let's jump into it. If you like trading content, and especially evergreen content which you can learn about psychology and obviously just general trading basics, that's what this channel is about. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate it. There's plenty of content for you to help you on your trading journey. So to keep it kind of casual and a bit more real, I'm just going to go through the Mag 7 stocks and kind of a couple more stocks as well, plus a trade that I've actually taken this morning, which is going to be irrelevant in terms of a trading evergreen thing, but it gives you a kind of idea of how I think about trades and how I take them. So everything I'm going to be doing here is obviously on the daily time frame, and you can see Apple on the screen. Now we go ahead and get rid of that because that's the title of the video. And what we're doing is we're basically trying to find as many touch points as possible with a line. Very, very simple. So up here, you've got a tool here, which is basically a trend line tool. And you just draw from the highest point on the chart and try and touch as many points on the way down as possible, as you can see. So we can see here, there's 1, 2, 3, possibly 4 points of contact. And we've got a bit of a breakout here from Apple. And this one's a bit of an anomaly because it's a bit of a gap up breakout. I wouldn't normally take that. And I haven't taken it, of course, but that's kind of what we're looking for. And on the other hand, from the downside perspective, you've got obviously a low down here, and you've got 2, 3 touch points, and obviously 4, which of course we actually broke down from there. So they're two kind of very simple trend lines. Typically, when you get a breakdown or break higher, you enter trades to the upside, to the downside. So that's kind of down to strategy, but the overall thesis is trying to get as many touch points as possible. Now, this is obviously the daily time frame. You can do this on the 5-minute, the 13-minute. You can do it on a weekly time frame as well. Let's do that. Why not? Let's have a look at the weekly time frame while we're here. And you can see the long-term trend for Apple. If you draw the lowest point on the chart, probably here, or maybe this is a kind of inflection point more so. Then you've got this kind of, that's actually a much better trend line. So from a weekly point of view, you can see really, really clearly this nice trend line set from back at the beginning of 2023, touched it back in the middle of 2024 last year, and lots of different touches this year, and of course a really good launch pad off of that. So if you're looking at Apple on the long-term time frame, then that could be a possible trading point for you. Right, let's move on to the next one. We've got Amazon. Very, very simple. Once again, we'll jump back into the daily chart here. And there's one I can see on the screen already. I don't know if you can see it now, but I'm just going to give you a couple of seconds to make sure you can kind of think in your head where I'm going to be drawing this line. And it's very simply here, from the lows all the way to the highs. And this one actually coincided with the earnings report. We had an earnings report a couple of weeks ago, and obviously subsequently broke this trend line. So there is a bit of a danger with this, especially when we come up to major events, whatever Donald Trump is saying at the time, of course. And of course, kind of earnings, as we've just touched on there, it could be a news release around the CEO or something. Anything can happen to break these trend lines. So where would you go from here? Now, that's a tricky question because it's kind of in a bit of limbo. You wouldn't go from here. You would perhaps actually draw the other way around, go from the highs set back in February and draw it for the highs just recently set late July. We would be looking to get rid of that, and we'd be looking for a return back up to this trend line, and that's where we kind of retest and see where we can go from there. If this is a low being set just recently, then of course you would draw from this low and then straight through to there. So then you've got another kind of nice little wedge, and you might get some price action kind of trading in between here until we make a break higher or obviously a break lower. So they're the things you're kind of looking for. And we'll move on to kind of a trading aspect a little bit later on, but that's kind of the basics of kind of drawing trend lines. We'll do a couple more examples while we're here. Barber's obviously a really good one as well. Drawing from the highs, take it from probably there because you've got 1, 2, almost 3, 4 touch points. And what we've done is we've come out of that and come back down and retested it, which is a really good example of my strategy, which is simply we come out of a trend line, we wait for it to come back down and retest that point, and then obviously it shoots up a little bit higher. And I would be looking for, as a target profit zone, of gap fills. So we've got one here, one here. So one's 132 and one's 142. So representative of that, if we entered this trade on the trend line retest, we would have 13% return and a 21% return over time. Of course, this is a swing trading point of view, but of course you can do this on the lower time frames, the 5-minute, 10-minute. Just transfer the data And obviously you have to be quite disciplined with it, of course, because the lower time frames, they naturally bring you more emotion. So you have to be quite analytical, and you have to execute those trades when you see them. Not all of them play out, of course, on the smaller time frames, because it's a lot more choppy, but it is worth pointing out. So that's a really nice one to have a look at there. That's Barber. We'll move on again to Google. This one, I mean, this one's actually quite nice because we're kind of coming out of the trend line here. So we've got a high there, and you've probably got here 1, 2, 3, 4 more touches more recently, and we've had a breakout actually on Friday yesterday. I'm filming this on Saturday, but that's not really relevant. So we've got a bit of a breakout here. So perhaps what we'd like to see in the next couple of weeks is obviously that breakout which has happened, maybe a bit of chop here, come back down and retest it, and obviously ultimately make a move higher. Target wise, this is trickier because it'll be all-time highs. What I tend to do with all-time highs is basically draw a trend-based fib extension. Now, I do have a video based on how to draw these. It'll be up on the top left-hand corner now. I'll also link it down in the description so you can take a look. You simply take it from the biggest low on the screen. You take it from the high that has been produced in that kind of time. Again, I explained it much better in that video. And you bring it down to the kind of most violent drop down. And there you go. You can see the lines actually being met on the screen. So lots of touch points with this line at 198. So you'd probably expect the stock to move towards 207, which obviously coincidentally kind of aligns with the all-time highs. So perhaps we're going to move to 207 and then a bit of a pullback back down to kind of 200 area, and obviously another move higher, maybe towards 219, 220, that kind of area. So that's a kind of tip there if you're trading towards kind of all-time highs. And obviously if you're looking kind of all-time lows, that's the thing. You just switch all of that. For example. So moving on, we've moved to Microsoft now. Of course, the trend line very, very simply on the screen here. We've got a bit of a gap up from the earnings back in May, and a very, very simple trend line upwards, which is quite phenomenal, really, from Microsoft. I would be looking for a break here, of course. The target prices are a bit tricky because there's no gap fills, so you'd probably turn on the volume profile if you have it available, and then maybe zoom out a touch just to see if you've got much more volume. There's still not a lot there. It's very, very tricky to see that. Of course, you've got previous all-time highs from July of last year. So perhaps that break downwards would make sense. If we were to break that, then perhaps straight back down to here would be a good spot to come to. 10% on the screen there. So that's a possible outcome, but you would have to have many other factors kind of go in place there. SPA would have to come down. The Qs would have to come down. So it's a tricky one, and we could just keep plugging up because that's what these stocks do. These big ones, they kind of just continue plugging up until we get a bit of news in the market and something to really kind of mix things up. So that's Microsoft. We move on now to Netflix. This one's a really good example of a recent breakout in the last couple of months. So we can see, you're probably going to see where I'm drawing this line. So remember, we're looking at the most contact points possible. So from all-time highs here, draw it down simply like that. You could probably even do it even a bit tighter like there because it's not a complete breakout here. So that's worth mentioning actually while we're here. So we've got a candle that's poking out, but it's not a complete break because you need another candle to break out. So a really good example of that is obviously here. So we've had a candle poking out here, and the next one has stayed above the trend line. So that is a breakout. And subsequently, we've had this nice push up yesterday, which obviously coincides with the volume profile on the right, which I'm going to get rid of because it will just confuse people. So ultimately, we're looking for that move back to the most recent resistance, and then of course the all-time highs as well. So your trade would be looking at something like, if we were to get in here, because obviously the optimal entry point will be the end of this day because that's the confirmation of the break. So that's 6%, and then of course after that 13%, which is nothing to grumble at on these big stocks. So that's pretty good return. Let's move on to Nvidia. This one's been on an absolute tear recently. Of course, we are in a bull market. That's kind of what happens in a bull market. So again, trend line from the most lowest point back in April, we just draw it straight up. It's a really nice trend line for Nvidia. Of course, we'd be looking for a breakdown more than anything because obviously there's nowhere for it to go upwards. Previous all-time highs are here. So if we were to get a bit of a breakdown in the next couple of weeks, maybe some news comes out, the earnings are just around the corner as well, which is just down here on the right side. If we were to get that breakdown, of course, maybe particularly now, just for an example, of course, hypothetically, that's a 15% return, which is not too bad at all. So these are the things you've got to be looking out for. The kind of target profit zones, got to be big resistance zones. You're probably going to get a lot of volume at that level as well. Let's turn it back on to have a look. Yeah, there's lots of volume, a little bit lower actually, kind of 145. So you could kind of come back down there, and there is actually a gap fill there as well, which I will just draw out for you very, very quickly. There you go, that's the gap fill there. I think there's actually one more as well, so which is there's a gap fill there as well. So there's a couple of gap fills to be had here on Nvidia. So these are the things you're going to look out for. Gap fills, previous all-time highs, and of course lots of volume on your charts. So moving on, we have Tesla here. Of course, this is the last one of the Mag 7 before we jump into my live trade, which I've taken this morning. And we'll draw out all of the kind of long position of the trade and all the lines as well, so you can kind of see my thesis around what I'm doing with that particular trade. But first, we have Tesla, and actually I have some pre-drawn lines because I'm in this trade as well as of the recording. Of course, this may not be the case when you're watching this in the future, but very, very simply, we have a wedge drawn on the screen, trend line from the bottom and trend line from the top. And of course, we have failed to break out a few times. This one was a fake out breakout. We don't really want to take that before earnings. And that's a very, very important tip. If you have a breakout happening like the day before earnings or even the day after, it's pretty tricky to kind of warrant trading that. So you can see the breakout was technically happened here, which is fine. And obviously the earnings played out and it obviously dropped down after earnings. A little bit more chop in the last couple of weeks. And of course, we've had that confirmation of the breakout now right at the end of the wedge as well, which is always nice to see. So you can see Wednesday's price action, really nice bull candle, coming up above the trend line there. And Thursday's was a confirmation break, and then Friday just carried on nicely. So I'm looking for a return of back up to kind of 420, I think it was. Yeah, 420, which is obviously a very relevant number for Tesla bulls and Elon Musk, of course. And then of course the stop loss, which is also very important, is kind of where we placed the most recent low. I haven't spoken about stop losses too much in this video, so maybe it's worth just touching on it now. So I basically place it below the most recent low of that particular trend line from the other side. And if it broken the other way, very simply, let me just hide that for now. We draw a short position. Of course, this is hypothetical. So we'd enter it here, and then the stop loss the other side would be just above this most recent low. Just ignore these candles, make them disappear in your mind. So of course we had that kind of price action coming down as the target price would very clearly be the lows of this chart, and of course the stop loss would be here. So that's the kind of other way around if Tesla was to have gone the other way around. If you haven't got this far, obviously make sure you drop a like and subscribe to the channel. I know there's been a bit of a hickledy-pickledy session that we've had here today, but that's kind of how I roll, to be honest. I like to teach live. I like to give my raw thoughts on these charts. So moving on to my live trade, and this is very, very simple. Of course, it's just trend line based, and it's a really good example of kind of what I've been talking about in this video. And well, I'm going to talk you through it now. So obviously we've got a trend line that goes way back to April, kind of the downturn of April. Lots of touch points here, 3 in fact, and then you've got another couple of touch points here. And then recently, in the last couple of weeks, this is the daily chart, of course. We've had a few more touch points here. You could probably bring this line up. It doesn't have to be exact. But the important part of this is, of course, the potential breakout that we're seeing right now. Now, you don't have to draw just one line. You can draw two if you're a bit unsure. They sometimes cross over a little bit. So you can kind of have the extra lines there just to kind of reinforce your trend line. And what I like about this, of course, is we have a push up out, which is great. We have confirmation of the break here with this candle, even though it did come back down. But that's a perfect entry point if we come back down to the trend line. And the reason I say that is because we go down into the lower time frames, the 4 hour, we can see obviously the break, confirmation of the break, is a few of them being obviously a lower time frame, and then we're just pushing out of that trend line now. So I've taken the trade, I think it was about here. We'll draw it on the screen here now for you. So that's the trade position. We'll just increase that and then move on to the daily chart so we can draw it out nicely. My stop loss is around here, obviously below the most recent low and below the trend line. This will be trailed up as the move matures, if the move matures, should I say. And then my first target profit zone will be around 122, I think I've got, which is obviously all-time highs for Bitcoin. This is not the ideal kind of ratio. It's 2-to-1 ratio, of course, and you could actually start with a stop loss here, and that's perfectly fine. That's down to your kind of risk appetite and your strategy, of course. It's been quite a long video. We'll leave it there. Hopefully you got some value out of it. If you've got any further questions, you can hit me up on X or obviously drop a comment down below. Really appreciate you watching this video. Hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next trading video. Take care and trade safe. And now my wife is calling me, so I better answer that. Hello. You know, Tesla balls and Elon Musk. Elon Musk? Who's Elon Musk?